Congratulations! Hey everybody, welcome to ESN, your source for everything news, views, and reviews that you can use. So buckle up, Buttercup, for this edition of Rapid Fire, because we have breaking news to share with you. It's pretty cool. I think you'll like this. Scientists talk to whales. Did you know that in the 70s, the Pentagon was doing experiments where scientists were learning how to communicate with dolphins? And I've heard rumors about scientists communicating with orcas. This is fascinating. This is breaking news. Just recently, scientists from the State University of California, Davis, and the Alaska Whale Foundation had a 20-minute conversation with a humpback whale named Twain in her own language. And the scientists are studying the whale's communication systems to learn how to detect and interpret extraterrestrial signals from outer space. They also believe that communicating with whales could help humans communicate with alien life in the future. Well, how about just communicating with whales? How cool is that? I mean, if you can communicate with a whale, can we create technology that can communicate with other animals? And when we can communicate with other animals the way that we can communicate with people or close, will that change the way we think about them? Will that change the way we think about ourselves? Will that change the way that we eat? Like, what if you could communicate now with a cow or a pig or salmon or a king crab or I don't know, what's some other, like, the cow's like, please don't eat me. Hi, Bob. I'm really pretty smart. I know you just see me here eating grass all day, but you haven't given me an opportunity to say anything yet. Now that you're giving me a chance to talk, I'd like to talk to you about Earth. Let's get into philosophy. Imagine if you get into a philosophical conversation with another animal, and then you're like, well, I'm hungry. But I'm not hungry for you anymore because we just had a philosophical conversation. I'm going to become a vegetarian. And then you start talking with plants, and it's just going to get more and more difficult to eat food. We're all going to have to become breatharians at this rate. I'm just joking, but not joking. I find this incredible, and I find it definitely something that in the very near future, we're going to see a lot more of these technologies that allow us to communicate with other animals. Like, what happens if you can communicate with a grasshopper or a mosquito? Like, the majority of the time I see bugs, I will walk around them or avoid them, even spiders, even black widows, okay? I think that they're all pretty cool. Mosquitoes, that's a different story. And look, I know they were made to suck blood, right? So it's not their fault. Sometimes they get a little greedy, but imagine if now you can communicate with insects. No, don't swat me. A fly's like, and you're like, it's like, no, please don't. I just wanted to check out your arm hairs. They looked really cool with my 1,000 eyes. I mean, it's pretty awesome. Talking to whales, humpback whales, of course. You're going to talk to any whale, might as well talk to the humpback. AI helps scientists speak with whales and aliens, maybe in the future. I mean, that's a pretty big deal. That's a pretty big deal. Here's the paper: Interactive Bioacoustic Playback as a tool for detecting and exploring non-human intelligence, conversing with an Alaskan humpback whale. Read all about it. For 20 minutes, they had a 20-minute conversation with a humpback whale. And then what? You just like, what did you talk about? I want to know what you talked about. What was it thinking? Doesn't say. Can you tell us what your conversation was about? Like, does it have concerns about the way giant corporations are destroying the planet and pillaging the earth and polluting the oceans? Is it concerned about any of that? Is it concerned about having a conversation? Is it like, how am I talking with you now? How are we doing this? Now they're talking about bioacoustic recording of signals or calls, noting their behavioral context, analyzing the acoustic structure. Now it is getting into insects and other animals. Just by the way, grasshoppers rub their legs together. Fireflies, bioluminescence, insect vibration, percussion, stridulation, gaze, gesticulation, Antiphonal calling. I want to know what you talked about, though. Was it like, what are y'all doing up there? Are y'all that bored that you have to spend that many hours posting what you eat on Facebook? Why don't you go travel the stars? Why don't you go make some spaceships and go explore? You've got thumbs. You've got fingers. It's a little bit more difficult for us humpback whales to make electronics in the ocean. Kind of hard for us to make microchips in the ocean. You have that ability. You have that ability to make a spaceship and travel the stars. But no, you have to argue with yourselves and say you can't do it. Meanwhile, others are. So ridiculous how people fight with each other. I'm surprised the Earth's in as good a shape as it is sometimes, to be honest with you, because there's some pretty silly people out there. But what were you talking about? This is the behavior, the orientation to the vessel when they were talking. What did you share with the humpback whale that the humpback whale can now go share with its companions and friends and family? I mean, if you can communicate with animals, what are you going to tell them? It's a pretty big deal. You're not telling us what you talked about, but the fact that you did have a 20-minute conversation with a whale, it's pretty dang cool. Now, I don't know if you knew about this. I've been talking about this for years. Cat ownership linked to increased schizophrenia risk. Read all about it. Neuroscience.com. Researchers systematically reviewed and meta-analyzed research from 1980 to 2023 to investigate the relationship between cat ownership and schizophrenia-related disorders. Out of 1,915 studies initially identified, 17 were included in the final analysis. The results showed a significant association with cat owners having higher odds of developing schizophrenia-related disorders. The unadjusted pooled odds ratio was 2.35 and the adjusted was 2.24. However, the link between cat ownership and psychotic-like experiences remained unclear due to varied measurement methods. Okay. Next article. I've been saying this. Artificial intelligence, pretty dang cool. It's not just used for doom and gloom. This is another cool feature. Using artificial intelligence, MIT researchers identify a new class of antibiotic candidates that haven't been discovered in 60 years. Listen to this. Using a type of artificial intelligence known as deep learning, MIT researchers have discovered a class of compounds that can kill a drug-resistant bacterium that causes more than 10,000 deaths in the United States every year. In a study appearing today in Nature, the researchers showed that these compounds could kill methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus MRSA grown in a lab dish and in 2 mouse models of MRSA infection. The compounds also show very low toxicity against human cells, making them particularly good drug candidates. The insight here was that we could see what was being learned by the models to make their predictions that certain molecules would make for good antibiotics. Our work provides a framework that is time efficient, resource efficient, and mechanicalistically insightful from a chemical structure standpoint in ways that we haven't had to date, says James Collins, the Termeer Professor of Medical Engineering and Science in MIT's Institute for Medical Engineering and Science and Department of Biological Engineering. Cool. Keep it coming. Way to go, AI. Now, this is interesting. Coming soon, the first ever supercomputer to match the human brain's 228 trillion operations per second. And I was like, looking at that, I'm like, well, wait a second. They've got computers out now that can calculate way more operations per second than that. But they're not designed the way that this one is. So this is a much more energy efficient computer. When it's operational, Deep South will be capable of performing a staggering 228 trillion synaptic operations per second. This is comparable to the level of activity across all the many interconnected neurons within the brain. And it's all thanks to its innovative neuromorphic design, which we were talking about yesterday. Progress in our understanding of how brains compute using neurons is hampered by our inability to simulate brain-like networks at scale, said Professor Andre von Schaik, director of the International Center for Neuromorphic Systems at Western Sydney. In a statement, simulating spiky neural networks on standard computers using graphics processing units and multi-core central processing units is just too slow and power intensive. Our system will change that. This is where it gets very interesting. Listen to this. The brain is a highly efficient a highly energy efficient system, and scientists have so far struggled to replicate this efficiency in a synthetic computer. Oak Ridge National Laboratory's Frontier supercomputer, considered by many to be the fastest computer in the world at present, requires 22.7 megawatts to run, as Domenico Vicinanza, Associate Professor of Intelligent Systems and Data Science at Anglia Ruskin University, explained at the conversation. The human brain, by contrast, can operate at the same speed, a billion calculations per second, which is an exaflop, only requiring 20 watts. So we're taking 22.7 million watts versus 20 watts. Way to go, human. Way to go, brain. Deep South will therefore allow researchers to explore computing in a less hungry way. Here's the Deep South computer. The neuromorphic design is also fundamentally distinct from that of traditional electronic computers, because electronic computers have basically been unchanged for decades. Up till now, computers have been characterized by separate processing and memory units. Data is stored in one place and manipulated in another. Now, while we still have a lot to learn about memory in the human brain, these new computers that mimic the human brain with neuromorphic circuitry are based on networks of simple processors that can all work in parallel, mimicking the way different neurons in the brain connect via synapses. They can fire simultaneously. The system is scalable and easily programmable from the front end using the popular Python programming language, meaning that researchers will be able to make use of the technology without an intimate understanding of the hardware itself. So that's really cool. This platform will progress our understanding of the brain and develop brain scale computing applications in diverse fields, including sensing, biomedical, robotics, space, and large-scale AI applications, Professor Von Schaik explained, going on to list advanced smart devices, agricultural sensors, more efficient artificial intelligence platforms as some of the possibilities. New brain-like transistor goes beyond machine learning. Scientists have previously only gotten synaptic transistors to work under cryogenic conditions, but this is the first time they can operate at room temperature and outperform today's best-in-class machine learning systems. It's getting faster and faster, and the more it mimics the human brain, the more efficient it gets, and then they add in some technological, they sprinkle some techno magic, and then it just, wow. Scientists have designed a transistor that stores and processes information like the human brain and can perform cognitive tasks that most artificial intelligence systems struggle with. So it can basically think like a person. It's a synaptic transistor. It mimics the architecture of the human brain, which the processing power and memory are fully integrated and found in the same place. So this brain has a fundamentally different architecture than a digital computer. Mark Hersman, researcher, co-leader, and professor of material science, engineer, and computing at Northwestern University, said in a statement, "In a digital computer, data move back and forth between a microprocessor and memory, which consumes a lot of energy and creates a bottleneck when attempting to perform multiple tasks at the same time. This has full integration between computing power and memory. The synaptic transistor can achieve significantly higher energy efficiency and move data extremely fast." Read all about it. Nature, just published December 20th. Look at this. This is crazy. Artificial intelligence recreates what people see by reading their brain scans. The bottom row is what the computer recreates. The top row is what people actually see. Now, does that freak you out a little bit? Black Mirror style, right? Well, don't worry, because they're going to use human bodies to help power the next generation of communications, 6G. Human body can help power 6G devices as antennas in the future, and it's going to boost signals. Brain organoids used as reserve computing for artificial intelligence. And then look at this. 75% accuracy, artificial intelligence can reconstruct images from people's brain activity. Not just what they're looking at, but what they're thinking about. It's wild. And there's still a long way to go with this technology. Here's the paper. takes the images through filters and then reconstructs them. Wow. Electric eel zaps can change fish DNA. An electric eel can discharge 860 volts in a shock, which is apparently enough to open pores in the cell membranes of fish larvae and invite in new genes. The process, dubbed electroporation, is known gene delivery technique in laboratories. But researchers now show that eels can do it naturally. Researchers aren't sure if this process has actually contributed to gene transfer in the wild, but eels certainly seem to have the capability to do it. Now, this makes me think of the changes in the human DNA connected to cosmic changes with our sun. There's a strong correlation there. That's fascinating. Putting DNA in another animal through electronic volts in nature as an electric eel. Nature's fascinating. Here's what I was looking for. So this is running the scale like even faster than a human brain. In theory, 1 quintillion calculations per second. More than that, 1 quintillion calculations per second. If every person on the planet completed 1 calculation per second, it would take 4 years to do what the exascale computer can do in 1 second. 40 megawatts. Frontier's mechanical plant can cool the equivalent power demand of about 30,000 houses. That's how much power this thing needs to keep it cool and to perform the way that it does, to be as efficient as it is. So I think this other computer is really cool because it's going to use far less energy and be maybe even more efficient in the future. And this is interesting. The U.S. economy could face a perfect storm if Basel III Endgame goes into effect. And here's why. The past 3 years of economic volatility, this is Fortune, have exacted a profound toll on many Americans, testing the resilience of households and businesses alike. During this period, the largest banks, fundamentally strengthened by a series of changes, have served as a source of support by extending enormous amounts of credit, helping customers navigate uncertainty and stabilizing the broader banking sector at a critical moment. Now, as the CEOs of these banks gather on Capitol Hill, Congress must ask itself if proposed regulations on capital jeopardize these essential works of these institutions. Basically, what this is a big deal, folks. This is huge. This is huge. I don't think people, like, this isn't getting nearly the amount of news that it should. The capital regulation plan known as Basel III Endgame will increase capital requirements by 20% or more for the 8 largest U.S. banks. This is an excessive move considering the tripling of high-quality capital for these banks over the past 15 years. Higher capital requirements, as noted by Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell, raise the cost of and reduce access to credit. Well, yeah. I mean, think about that. So how much, let me type something in here. How much can a bank leverage $1? It goes on to say this is not professional financial advice. Consulting a financial advisor about your particular circumstances is best. This is generative AI in Google. But let's read this. The standard leverage limit for banks is 3%. This means that for every $1 of a capital a bank has in reserve, it can lend $33. So if the bank has $1 million, it can lend $33 million. Now, they want to take that up to 20% for the banks. Do you know how crazy that sounds to me? I mean, if we establish the economy a little bit differently, but the way that the world works now, especially in America, I mean, that's wild. That is wild. So that's one of the reasons I'm a huge fan of stacking metals: gold, silver, platinum, precious metals, as well as different cryptos. I'm a huge fan of cryptos. I've got cryptos. And I think that there's some good alternatives out there to help people with these just insane, like, have you seen interest rates? We were going to buy a house and the interest rates got so high that just the interest alone was going to increase our house payment by over $1,000 a month. So there's a lot going on. And, they've been talking about the collapse of the dollar now for years. I wouldn't be surprised if something does happen, there's going to be a transition that'll take place into like the new digital dollar. Maybe. Just things going through my mind. So I want to get your thoughts. Thank you for watching. Hit the bell for all notifications. Check back daily. We do updates every single day. And, here at ESN, IC News, we like to question everything. We recommend you question everything. Think for yourselves. Do your own research. Be prepared, not scared. And be the change the world needs to see.